Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Aryan, and if you've seen my previous videos, you know I love the M1 Macs. So I have a 24-inch M1 iMac that has 16 GB RAM, 1 TB SSD, and an 8-core CPU and GPU. And I also have a M1 MacBook Air that I bought for $899 on education discount, which has a 7-core GPU, 8-core CPU, and the base model 8 GB RAM. Both these machines are a beast. So I bought the space gray color, and you can see me here opening the M1 MacBook Air, and I received this around 2 months ago and it's been amazing. The M1 iMac, I bought it the moment it launched, and the performance it's given me is mind-blowing. So we're going to compare these two devices in many ways, and probably the main difference between these two Macs are the difference in RAM or unified memory, 16 GB on the iMac versus 8 GB on the MacBook Air. I've got around 11 to 12 hours of battery life on the M1 MacBook Air, and obviously the iMac doesn't have a battery. So I take it for school every day, and it gives me around 8 to 9 hours with Microsoft Teams on. So let's start our test with Geekbench 5. So you can see here, I'm opening Geekbench 5 on my iMac. Now I'm going to run a CPU benchmark on the M1 24-inch iMac. This is going to take some time, so I'm going to skip it for you guys. Okay guys, we've just finished and we've got a single core 1728 on the iMac 24-inch with 16 GB of RAM and 7697 on the multi-core test. So that's pretty impressive, especially the single core test. Now let's try it out on the M1 MacBook Air. Just keep in mind guys that the M1 MacBook Air does not have any fans. You can see how thin the M1 MacBook Air is, and I don't think there's any space to fit in fans. Also, the M1 chip is so power efficient, it actually won't thermal throttle, unless you do some serious editing or tests like Cinebench R23. Okay, so I just finished downloading Geekbench on the M1 MacBook Air, so let's run our CPU benchmark on Geekbench 5. I'm gonna skip this part for you because it's kinda boring. Okay, we're done with the tests. We got 1738 on the single core and 7645 on the multi-core test. These two devices are so similar because it's the same M1 chip with the 8-core CPU. The Geekbench 5 isn't really a test that ramps up the fans on the iMac, so maybe we'll test Cinebench R23 to test how the M1 chip thermal throttles on the M1 MacBook Air versus iMac 24-inch. I see other YouTubers on YouTube comparing these MacBooks and iMacs to $5,000 iMac Pro, which they bought around 2 years ago, and those were pretty expensive. And now we're getting this same performance in a $2,000 machine and even an $899 machine. So now let's move right on to Final Cut Pro editing on both the machines. As you can see, this is my 24-inch iMac, and I'm editing the current video that you're seeing on your screen right now. So I edit on Final Cut Pro X, and swiping and going from one frame to another is extremely smooth. This is 1080p 60 FPS recorded on an iPhone 8. So if I try to play it back, I think it's really great. And if you've seen my previous videos, you know I love the M. Yeah, so it's kind of it's so smooth, runs exactly at 60 FPS, and that's because of the M1 chip, the M1 chip ARM architecture. And even if I swipe and slide along, it's perfect. It's literally perfect. Now I added some sound effects, stabilization, and some color boards over here. So let's see how it works. Just look at this part over here to see if it's moving smooth. Okay, so right now it's moving smooth, but the moment I added an effect, that became a little choppy, but it does render over time. Guys, before we move on to the M1 MacBook Air export and rendering time, just make sure to like and subscribe, and also see my blogs on Medium. They'll really help you if you should buy the 13-inch MacBook when the M2 MacBook Air will release, and some leaks and rumors, and what configuration should you get for your MacBook Pro. I'll be making a video on this soon, so make sure to like and subscribe so that you get my notifications. Okay, so over here you can see that I have 1080p 60 FPS footage. I'm gonna put some stabilization on it so it makes it even harder. It's gonna analyze for dominant motion. So I'm gonna put the smoothing to maximum to see if the MacBook Air can actually work. I'm also gonna put some sound effects. Like a crash, bang, ambient hit. I'm just gonna bundle them up over each other, and also some more streams some footage. So I'm gonna put some more of this footage on top to see if it can actually handle it. Yep, let's try it now. So it seems to be working beautifully, totally smooth, 100% smooth. Now there's no frame bleeding, and it's perfect. I swear it is perfect, literally perfect. This is the best video editing device you can get on the market right now. I mean, obviously you have the M1 Pro and Max MacBook Pro, so those are for a little higher end users, but for consumers or little partly pro consumers, this is the device for you, the M1 MacBook Air or the 24-inch iMac if you're working on desktop. Guys, please bear in mind that the M1 MacBook Air has one less GPU core. It's a 7-core GPU instead of 8-core on the M1 24-inch. Okay, now we're going to export these projects from the 24-inch iMac and the MacBook Air. And this is going to be 1080p, 60 FPS. So let's start. This is going to be Apple devices 1080p, and it's going to be .mp4. And let's do it on the MacBook Air also. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so let's just open up this rendering procedure over here. The M1 24-inch iMac seems to have a head start by just a second, but I think it's going well. The 24-inch iMac is at 21% and the MacBook Air at 11%.